Hello, SleepyReader666. You were the only person to ask me any questions from my last video. Yes, SleepyReader666, I'll be answering you now, if that is indeed your real name. Question 1. Have you ever written or drawn your own comic book? Yes, actually. Well, half. I run now a club that we've redubbed Homebrew Comics here in Boulder. We used to be the Boulder Comics Co-op due to local press, the Westward, dubbing us so, and I decided one drunken night that wouldn't do. But I am right now the only chief writer, I guess. We have a bunch of artists and some people that write and draw. A lot of amazing talent there. I've done a lot of small stuff for anthologies that we've put out. The main thing that I've done was a book called Mitch the Middle Class Merc. Number 1, we were hopefully retouching that, but I'm not sure if that's going to see fruition. Also, there's an issue 2 that I've scripted, working on layouts currently, and the artist is supposedly drawing it. He's working on... Actually, his weekly challenge right now is to work on some more character designs. It's a slow process, and it's an uphill battle with motivation. I'm also thinking about doing a couple of scripts that would be different, but I'd have to find another artist to make that work, and one of them is really hard because I'd have to do a lot of research to write the script, and if I don't think I'd have an artist for it, it's really hard to find the motivation. I've also toyed around with the idea of maybe trying to take some art and do poetry to it, because I used to be more of a poet, but see if that ever happens. It's been attempted before, but never to any real success or anything. I think it's mostly been images and words juxtaposed, and I'd rather do something different if you're going to make it a comic. What do I read besides comics? Not much. I read some stuff on the internet. Most anything else I do as far as taking in information is listening to stuff on the internet or watching shows. The only thing I really read anymore are comics, and that came from being an English major in which I had teacher after teacher just pummel me with terrible stories that I hated to read, and slowly I developed a hatred of reading prose. So I haven't really done that since college, save if someone I know writes something, I will sit down and read that and find that I enjoy it a lot more than trying to actually pick up a full-length novel. Right, this next question is 3. How out there are you as a comic book reader? Will you read comics in public, cafes, restaurants? Do most people know you read them a lot and vlog about them? So, most of the time if I'm reading at home, just because if I'm out and about hanging with friends, but I don't really care. For my lunch break at work, I always bring in a stack, and, well, usually I try to bring in a tray, because I hate having ads on the back. I guess I'm a little self-conscious, and if it's, it's like cheesecake on the front, I'll try to save that for reading at home. But, they know I read comics, that I'm really into it, and I'm certainly out there. I did a lot of stuff and definitely put myself out there, and I was helping out with Comic Fest and then currently Denver Comic Con, which won't be an issue anymore, but I've always just kind of been the comic guy with my friends and whatever. People know I like comics. If people don't want to talk about comics, I have other interests, but most of the time it's video games or comics, so there you go. Oh, and the other part is do people know that I vlog about them? That one I don't always bring up necessarily. I don't know, I mean, I'll put it out there. A lot of my friends know and will watch this occasionally, but Alright, question number 4. Do you feel oppressed by the long history of superhero comics? Not quite sure how to take that one, so I'm going to go with where I started, because I guess that would have been when I would have felt that way. When I was getting into comics, it was kind of the heyday of superhero shows. There was the 90s Spider-Man show, which is fairly well received. There was the Batman animated series, which... awesome, right? Although I never was really into Batman, so I took the show and that was it. That's all I knew of Batman for the longest time. Then there was still the Ninja Turtle show running, and then there was the X-Men show. So I had acquired a small handful of comics. Probably the ones that are the worst treated were like Archie, Ninja Turtles, and then a couple of the Batman Adventure comics, which I talked about before. And then I wanted to start breaking in. The first Spider-Man comic I ever bought was Web of Death 404, which, looking back to this day, has probably about the worst lettering I've ever seen in in a professional comic. And so to this day, there are sections I can't read because I can't make out what the text is supposed to be, because it's this terrible, like, Mary Jane writing over most of it, but it's supposed to be your diary, and it's supposed to be cursive, and it just doesn't... It's a really, really bad font. So I was really baffled by that, and that kind of put me off Spider-Man for a while, believe it or not. And so I wanted to get into the X-Men, but I was really baffled by a lot of the characters, and there was a lot that weren't in the cartoon. So what I did to start getting into it was, at the time they were selling these trading cards, and on the back there was like a profile, and more importantly there was a power description, which was huge. I mean, I found out Cyclops wasn't shooting like heat rays, but he was shooting optic blasts that actually like push things and destroy them. It's actually more like shooting a giant energy wedge, and that blew me away. And then I still, through the cards, did not understand what Cable or Bishop was supposed to be. As a matter of fact, Cable, for the longest time, I just assumed was like gun guy, even though I already had telekinesis and whatnot. But I never liked the way he was written until I saw him in Cable and Deadpool years later, which is true. I mean, even going back and trying to read some of the comics, and then Bishop, I only found out what his powers really were like 5 years ago when I read like an entire like 3-paragraph description on like Wikipedia or something. And that's what that took for me to figure that out, and I went back and thought about the comics that he was in, and that finally made sense. So there was that. So I can't really imagine like trying to come in now. I mean, the tools are there, because when I started, we didn't have the internet. Damn kids. We had to figure out other things and buy these trading cards or something. But yeah, when I was coming in, it was like Spider-Man's 30th anniversary and stuff, and I mean, there's all this history, and just coming in, I kind of resigned myself that I was never going to read all this, but there's a lot of stuff I wanted to read that felt really impossible. In the 90s was really hard to come in. Like, everyone was talking about the Age of Apocalypse. I didn't get to read Age of Apocalypse like 3 years ago when they recollected it, because trying to go back and collect all those issues, you couldn't find most of them, and where they were, what they were named, was all over the map. So I was really happy to finally get to read that. And then there was some other things, like the first trade I ever bought was a collection of Maximum Carnage, which was like the biggest Spider-Man story I'd ever seen, and it was huge, and I just kind of would pick up chunks and pieces, and I'd rarely buy new issues, but I'd actually go into the back issues and buy entire arcs and try to pick out like characters. So for a while I had this thing about the Juggernaut, and then I was really excited when I found out that what actually brought me into buying new issues is they just wrapped up this arc with a Green Goblin and Hobgoblin, and I was like, oh man, and this just came out, and it felt so cool to read, what other people at the time are reading, and try to talk to people at the comic shop about it. And I slowly went in, and then I got a subscription from Marvel through the mail, which if you've ever done that, is a terrible idea, because somehow or another your comic is showing up damaged somewhat, which, but yeah, it's terrible. And actually, that was a hell of a shocker, because the first comic I ever got in the mail was the black cover 9/11 tribute issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, and that was something else. So yeah, I imagine it's really hard to get in now. I've recently fielded a lot of people asking me specifically about where they think they should get into on Amazing Spider-Man, and I'll try to reference a couple older arcs. Like, if you want to check these out, these are from a while ago, but they're considered good. But if you want to break in now, either wait for the next story arc to start, which will be, X issue, or more recently go back and start at the beginning of Big Time, which is the beginning of the current run, and it's really good. So if you're new, I mean, that's one way to start. But if you're new, you just gotta kind of like pick a point to break in. If you just pick a random issue, it can kind of suck. Like, for instance, Minutia Minute just started at Ninja Turtles, and he started up at 11, which is like this penultimate issue to the first arc, which is really like the first 12 issues interwoven with every micro series issue before it, and it's like, man, damn it. I'm glad he's found some way to enjoy some of it, but you literally would be lost. They were not counting on people doing that clearly, and it would be rough. But if you stick with it, and plus they make it really easy to go back now. I mean, if you're trying to get into comics, I would not recommend issues. I would recommend trades, and I imagine that makes it a lot easier now. But they do have a tendency to really want to start at the beginning, even with characters that it doesn't matter. Like, honestly, the early Amazing Spider-Man stuff, like a lot of the Stan Lee issues, if you like them, hooray that they're collected. But really, if you're trying to break into the character at this point, most of that's so irrelevant, it doesn't even matter. And then you kind of would have to cherry pick some of that and then build up, and I mean, like the Venom stuff, and then the later Sinister Six, and then some touches, and then kind of build up to where the continuity reset. But then there's like the first chunk of the Strensky run, as long as he was with Romita, like that's all really relevant and good and says a lot about the character, and interestingly, very rarely dealt with any of his classic Rogues Gallery. So there's that. And I mean, I guess just the fact that I'm talking about this for like 10 minutes just because the question proves how like insane it is. But I mean, if you can't get into that, I can't imagine loving superhero comics. So there's that. And of course, I mean, if you're a new reader, usually the last thing I'll try to recommend to them is superhero comics. I'd recommend, a good Vertigo title or anything else. So yeah. So again, if anyone has any questions, I think I've proven that I'll answer them. Yeah, feel free to ask away, and hopefully I'll see you all soon. I have plans for some videos coming out, so if you feel bombarded, I assure you they're all top-notch. Thanks again, SleepyReader666. He's just done a lot of amazing stuff on his channel that you should all go check out. And then like this video if it's your first time. Subscribe or else. And yeah, questions. Just questions down below. No death threats this time. Those are for other videos. This time, questions.